starting out of college, I studied political science and English as an undergraduate, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I started initially in an industry that was not the best place to make a living or a career, but something that I was very passionate about, sailing, and realized very quickly that that was not going to be a place to make a living or a career. And I just continued to keep that as a passion, a personal passion and a hobby. And pivoted quickly and went back to school and got an MBA before I had really dug into any career direction. And I used it as, I thought of it as like a productive holding pattern, as a way to acquire a bit more knowledge and context, a credential, and also to better understand what it is I might want to do for a living or what I was qualified to do. I always was a writer and a reader. I was always very curious, but I didn't know what that meant, how to apply that in business or professional terms. And during my MBA program, I realized pretty quickly that I was sort of born to be a marketer. In fact, I'm not sure if there was anything else I was qualified to do. So that was really just the epiphany that led to me entering marketing. The way that I got into that discipline was first through the agency world, which I think is a great place to start out for anyone going into marketing, because you learn a ton very, very fast. You're exposed to lots of different client situations. It's very fast paced, very deadline driven, and you just learn a lot very fast. You'll also end up networking quite a lot. So I ended up working subsequent to that experience for two of my clients from the agency world. So I learned a lot fast. I met a lot of people very fast, and I started to get sort of proximity to what it is I might want to do longer term. And I remember setting the goal when I was working at a PR agency that I wanted to be a CMO. I didn't entirely know at that time what that would entail, but that was my goal. I set that as my personal goal. So I left agency world and I went to work for a venture-backed software company, and in an in-house PR capacity. So running PR for this venture-backed software company. That company grew very fast, filed to go public, and then the market changed pretty dramatically. We withdrew our S1, never got public. Ultimately, it wasn't a successful end, but I got the bug. So by virtue of having that experience, I realized this is what I need to do because this is super exciting. And I wasn't super successful with that one. That was just a mistiming and lack of luck on that one becoming a success. But I saw the pattern and I realized what it might take to do it again. So I went out and did that 6 or 7 more times, and at different levels of responsibility. So I went from PR to product marketing to product management, to sort of broader marketing generalist roles with demand generation and brand and communications functions, all reporting up to me. My first VP of marketing role, my first CMO role. And after doing this 6, 7 times, some of them were successful. Some of them weren't. You put the same level of effort into all of them. Like it just consumes a whole lot of your energy. And when you run as hot as I do, and I tend to be fairly passionate, it can burn you out. So at some point along the way, I decided I don't want to do this anymore. And I'm gonna try to climb a different hill. I'm gonna set a new challenge for myself and see if I can tackle that. So after a period of some independent consulting, I went to work for Gartner, which was a big technology syndicated research company, as an industry analyst. So looking at markets, looking at technology categories, advising clients, publishing research. Jason did this early in his career as well for a couple of different companies. And it sort of scratched the itch that has driven me to that point in my career: curiosity, goal setting, discipline, habit, ritual, writing, communicating, thinking analytically. And I was pretty good at it. I didn't expect that it would be as good of a fit as it was, but it was actually pretty easy work for me. And did that for 5 years, which is the longest I've ever stayed in any one role with any one company. And so 5 years was like an eternity for me. But after time, I realized that, and I'm giving you the very long story here. I hope that's okay.
That's all right. I know you well enough to shut you down if I think it's going too long, but it's good.
Good, good, good. Hopefully I don't wander off into the wilderness here. So as I was doing that, I realized that it was super stimulating, but then it plateaued. It became fairly repetitive, and I felt like I was having the same 6 conversations with clients. It was almost too easy, which may be a bit of an overstatement, but it was no longer as stimulating as it had been. And I was drawn back to the operator side of the world of startups. And that's my most recent role before I joined MetaCX, as I was CMO of a company called Pendo. At the time, it was a Series B company. They had raised about $25 million, about 100 employees. And over the 3 years I was there, we grew to almost 500 employees. We raised another $175 million at $1 billion valuation and became one of the fastest growing, most successful software companies on the planet. It was an amazing ride. Both the best and worst thing I've ever done for reasons you can imagine. It was intense, but it was the best thing I've ever done professionally, and I'm super proud of the work. And then that brought me here, and I've essentially taken on broader responsibility with an earlier stage company. So I'm responsible for marketing and sales and customer success, professional services, and technical support. So I essentially have half of the business where the CEO is focused on technology, product, investor relations, operations, finance.
That's great. Thanks so much. Really interesting to hear the trajectory. And I can say that over the years, Jake has taken on so many different roles that keeping up from him, I spent a lot of time, ping-ponging back and forth between Brazil and living in different cities. And, for certain periods, I would always have the wrong email address for Jake because the startup world and the tech world is fast changing and Jake is pretty fast changing within that. So a lot of different perspectives. Let me ask a question about planning your route, because I think on the one hand, you learn skills, you plan ahead, and then on another, there are opportunities that present themselves and you adapt. So how have you thought through, planning your career versus making the most of opportunities that you might not have been able to plan for?
That's a really interesting question. I mentioned that I did set the goal of becoming a CMO, and that's a goal I achieved. So I knew pretty early that that's what I wanted to do. So I was mindful of, I had a direction in mind, but along the way, if you think of getting from point A to point B, it's always going to be a bit of a zigzag. There were plenty of false starts and poor decisions and a lot of good ones too. So I think that it's a hard question to answer succinctly because I don't know how to articulate it, to be completely candid with you. But it's trusting your instincts and being true to the direction that you set for yourself, but also being open and flexible to opportunities as they emerge and learning, because I got plenty of them wrong, but I tried not to get them wrong more than once. So you end up doing something and you learn from that, and then it informs the next move you make in your career, and hopefully you get smarter about the decisions you make with each subsequent move.
Yeah, and I think just a question about different cultures, because I know that you don't need to go beyond the borders of the United States to see differences, but I know that you've worked for companies that have operations and development in different countries. So what is it, and very difficult to generalize about different places, but what are the attributes as someone who's leading and managing teams and traveling to different places? What are the attributes of people that have been great to have on your team, and what's worked well with remote work? And what are the sort of red flags or concerns that you would have from past experiences?
Yeah, great question. So when I'm hiring, I'm always looking for curiosity. So people that are intellectually curious and driven to get better, driven to learn. I'm definitely a sucker for passion. So people that care a whole lot about what they do and take the work very seriously. I'm driven by people who know how to collaborate well. I'm definitely always looking for signs of ego. Like you need to have you have to confidence and conviction in yourself, but it can't be about you. So people that are ego driven are typically not the easiest ones to work with. Um, and yeah, I mean, those are sort of the characteristics and traits. Of course, as a baseline consideration, it's just intellect. Like there needs to be a baseline level of intellectual horsepower, of analytic capability. But that is not that's necessary but insufficient. It's all those other attributes that really are the differentiators that cause me to want to work with someone.
Great, thanks. So I'm going to hit Jake up with one or two more additional questions. I put everybody on mute just because we've got a decent sized group to try to have a free for all, but feel free either to, virtually raise your hand if you know how to do that, or stick a comment in, or just, wave at me. I'm not looking at all of you, but get a question out there. Want to turn this after one or two more questions into something that's more open and more interesting for Jake, because he's listened to me, more than he wants to, and perhaps vice versa. So, Jake, you did have a chance to, visit and come to Brazil once. And I know that that's a limit. I don't recall if you've had software developers or anybody, from Brazil in the past.
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Was Japan the place that you had the most?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in Japan and all over Europe, Western Europe, Central Europe, and Eastern Europe. And India. I've spent a fair amount of time in India as well. But Brazil, I've been to twice. It's a beautiful country. I haven't done any business in Brazil to speak.
Yeah. What, and in the, sort of Europe or Japan or the areas where you've had more context, are there differences, or it's, nope, you want to have the intellectual horsepower that you talked about and the drive to get things done, and other than that, it's a question of time zone and logistics? Or are there things that, have stuck out?
Yeah, there's significant differences. I think one, as a leader, there's like four things that have always driven me as a leader. The first is sort of respect and appreciation, and then trust and accountability. Those are kind of the four principles of what I think makes good leadership. I think implied in there, and maybe a fifth, is empathy. So being sensitive to how other people are sort of their cultural cues and who they are as individuals, how they make decisions, how power flows within their organization, certain political characteristics of those environments. It's just really important when you're managing globally distributed teams to just have an understanding of those environments and be sensitive to those things. So it's not to say that I ever became an expert in Japanese business culture, but I did my best to listen intentionally and learn and try to be sensitive to the things that didn't work in that culture, not only for my benefit, but for the benefit of the people that worked for me. So it's just really having that lens on the world of having sensitivity and empathy for the people that you're working with.
Yeah, you said that you try to learn from mistakes and not repeat them, and I think learning from your own mistakes is great. Learning from other people's mistakes is perhaps better for better in certain areas, certainly less painful.
Yeah.
So if you reflect back a little bit, particularly, you've changed roles a lot, grown in your roles, changed, sort of career focuses a few times. This is a broad-based group. So either through your personal experience or errors, or from those of people that you have encountered, if you're in a tough market and you're trying to break into a new area or convince someone to either get a client, you're growing the size of business, you're trying to sell yourself, you're trying to sell your company. What are things that stick out as, sort of something that's been successful either that you have done and experimented with, or that somebody has shown to you? And then the reverse of that, what's something that you would say, ooh, wow, do not do this if you're trying to, break into a new market or get a new job or, gain someone's trust?
Yeah, 100%. I'd say one of the things that I've seen a lot of throughout my career is people who are sort of presumptuous about your willingness to meet with them, or kind of pushy about, hey, can we meet for coffee? Could we connect for a beer? Where there's no context whatsoever, like there's no familiarity, there's no relationship, and then persistence and following up on that basis without really doing anything to distinguish themselves, or share any kind of anything that speaks to the value that I'm going to get from that interaction. It
Yeah.
feels very one-sided.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one of the things to avoid. However, that's not to say that you shouldn't do it. You should just do it in the right way. So there is a value exchange that occurs when you give someone a value, something truly of value. That could be an insight. It could be a compliment. It could be a link to something that you saw that was relevant to something about them through your own research and reading. Those are the things that begin that value exchange and make an impression. The people that I've generally hired in the past have come through my personal network more than anything. The ones that have come in cold have come in with that sort of calling card.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to invite people to unmute themselves. So if you would like to ask a question, I have another one, which I will give one last one if somebody doesn't step up, and then I will do the volunteering of someone to ask a question. So please, I will pause for 3 seconds. If someone wants to step in now, please do. If not, I'll ask one last question and then I'll open it up after this one.
To the bone.
To the bang.
Hi, can I ask?
Please.
No.
Okay, my name is Analicia. I'm a little bit nervous because
it's okay. Be nervous. Me too.
It's a big group,
Yeah.
and I've watched some meetings with people from throughout the world about getting a job outside Brazil in IT area. So what can you bring us like tips for a good resume or something like this that could help us to get this kind of job? I've never worked outside Brazil, so it would be I don't know, maybe explain for us something.
Sure.
Like.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the way that I would think about IT broadly is there's kind of two sides to the coin. One is IT operations, so systems administration, network management. So managing the infrastructure, what's often called like ping, power, and pipe. It's the stuff that keeps the lights on. And that is one set of skills that has its own set of certifications and credentials that you could pursue, like Cisco certified network engineers and things like that. I'm not actually super deep in that area, but there's a whole list of things you could do on the ops side. And then on the application development side, there are other credentials and skills that you could develop around building applications, both commercial and custom applications. And that world tends to be divided in sort of front end and back end. And back end developers tend to be more lower level coders. So it seems to be harder work. There's fewer people who are qualified as back end engineers. And then front end engineers are more focused on developing the user experience, the user interface. It's a combination of sort of both sides of the braid. There's some coding associated with it, but you're working within frameworks and becoming familiar in those frameworks, things like React and React Native and Angular would be two of the more popular ones that are used today. And then there's this third category, which is kind of the unicorn, which is a full stack developer who can operate up and down the stack, both front end and back end. So hopefully that gives you sort of a lay of the land with respect to the world of ops, the world of application development, and how those worlds would split out. But I would try to make some distinctions about which side that sounds more appealing to you, and within that discipline, which role, and then try to identify the credentials and the skills necessary to perform that role, and get that training as a way to target your experience. And then when you're seeking a job, you've created some specialization. So you're not going in broadly and saying, I'm interested in IT. You're going in and saying, I'm a Cisco certified engineer and I want to run networks within a enterprise organization.
Great, thanks. Anybody else have questions?
Me.
Please, Josiane.
Hi, Jake. I am Joseanne, and I saw the areas of your expertise is growth and strategies. Well, I am in a moment of my life that I'm kind of stuck. I know what I have to learn, but I'm not growing. I'm not learning it right. So I want you to talk about more your strategies to grow. What you do, what you do actually.
Yeah, so it's a really good question. It's a hard one too. I'm a big believer that everyone is a superpower. There's something that each of us do, some skill or talent or capability that is disproportionately better than the next person. So it's having the self-awareness to understand what you're really good at, or have the capability to become good at and passionate about. So at the intersection of things you're good at or have the capability of becoming good at and really love, that's sort of the lane to follow. So for me, it was always writing. Writing has always been my sort of differentiator. It's how I think, it's how I communicate, it's how I make sense of the world. And I've also honed the skill, both because I had a natural inclination toward it. I was not always a particularly good writer, but I kind of saw the potential and I loved it. So both of those things really sort of inspired a 30 plus year pursuit of that craft and just getting as good at it as I could get.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I think there's another person. I can barely see you. I'm sorry. Elizabeth.
If there's somebody, be sure to unmute yourself and just speak up. Okay, while we wait for someone to get the courage to speak up, or I'll just force that on the next person. Could you talk a little bit about your pivot from Pendo as a chief marketing officer to being the president of MetaCX and what that change has been like, and also explain a bit about what MetaCX does?
Sure. So it's been a pretty seamless transition. Pendo, I described how fast Pendo grew, and growth like that fast hurts. You're forced to learn a lot really fast, and you end up breaking a lot of things and making a lot of mistakes. And it really forces, I mentioned this idea of not making the same mistakes twice and learning from the things you do wrong. It really compresses that whole cycle. So there's a level of rigor and intensity that comes with that level of growth that I feel like, honestly, I don't mean this to sound arrogant, but I don't know if there's no professional circumstance you're going to put me in that's going to scare me more than that did. So it hasn't felt like a particularly difficult transition for me. I've taken on broader responsibility, and while I haven't owned a revenue number directly in the past, I've always operated as if I did. So ultimately, everyone owns the revenue number, and marketers who want to last in their profession, marketing leaders that want to last in their profession, better operate that way, because they do have the expectation of creating revenue for the company and revenue that's attributable to their efforts and investments. So I've always lived in that world. So that has not been a huge stretch for me. I also just like the challenge. I've always been a bit of a freelancer. I'll bounce around between things, and I'm curious enough to want to develop some working knowledge of different functions. And so that gives me familiarity around a lot of different things within the business. And then the curiosity that I have drives me to go deeper and develop more expertise in areas where I just had a working knowledge. So that's a long-winded way of saying that it has not been particularly hard.
Yeah, great. So I'm about to do something which happens a lot in US classrooms, but in my experience, less so in Brazil, which is, the cold call and making sure that people are engaged. So we've had some good questions and input and want to keep that going. So I am going to put somebody on the spot now, and I'm going to unmute Vinny because I know that he's got some interest in, I believe, marketing and tech marketing. So Vinny, are you still there, or did you jump off the call as soon as I said I was going to call on you?
No, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, we can, and I'll figure out how to spotlight your video.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Jason, and Jake. Thank you very much for your time here.
My pleasure.
We really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I really identify myself to you, like when you say you had to change some plans during your career. I'm around my 30s, and I've been studying since I was 11, a very different area. I'm a musician. I'm actually a violinist player.
Awesome. Amazing.
And and it's been